The US struck Iran for a second consecutive day on Monday, drawing Iranian retaliation against US allies across the Gulf. Now, the escalation comes as Washington and Tehran remain locked in a standoff over the strategic Strait of Hormuz, which was not even the initial sticking point. That is the nuclear program. Iran's Revolutionary Guard has declared the waterway as being closed. The US military, however, insists that shipping is flowing and says Iran does not control the strait. Iranian attacks on the shipping in the Strait of Hormuz earlier in the week triggered the latest round of fighting, along with sharply escalating rhetoric. The US military says that its campaign is aimed at degrading Iran's ability to target civilian mariners and commercial shipping. US Central Command has even targeted Iranian air defense systems, coastal radar sites, missile and drone capabilities, as well as fast attack boats. Now, on Monday, the US military introduced a new element to the campaign, and that's one-way attack sea drones, which were used for the first time in this war, alongside fighter aircraft, naval vessels, and one-way attack aerial drones as well. Tehran blames the US strikes for the return of instability, saying that they have undermined all efforts to restore peace in the region. Iran has also responded by targeting US military facilities and bases in Jordan, Bahrain, and Kuwait. They earlier also targeted facilities in Qatar. Iran's Revolutionary Guard also claimed responsibility for a rare strike on Oman. Now, the attack came just hours after Oman hosted Iran's foreign minister for talks on the future of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran says that the talks produced no breakthrough, blaming US pressure on Oman. Tehran has been pushing for a joint statement with Oman to impose fees on shipping transiting the strait. The US says its strikes are designed to weaken Iran's grip on the waterway, but the outcome remains uncertain. Rather than relying on a conventional naval blockade, Iran employs a low-cost, decentralized strategy that includes mobile shore-to-ship missiles, fast attack boats, sea mines, electronic warfare, and attacks on nearby oil infrastructure or Western assets in Gulf states to raise the cost of the conflict. Now, the bigger challenge here, it may be the confidence, even if the US military destroys significant Iranian capabilities and insists that the strait remains open, commercial shipping companies may still refuse to transit the waterway, simply owing to the threat of Iranian missiles. For Iran, control of this Strait of Hormuz has become its most powerful leverage, and they've understood it since February 28th, leading to now. An advisor to Iran's supreme leader said on Sunday that the control of the strait was more valuable than dozens of atomic bombs. Tehran believes the control of the Hormuz Strait could determine whether the conflict ends in a negotiated settlement or a decisive defeat. All right, joining me live from Tel Aviv is Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Mordechai Kedar, former senior IDF military intelligence officer, an Israeli scholar of Arabic culture, and a lecturer at Bar Ilan University. Lieutenant Colonel, thank you so much for joining me here, sir. Thank you so much for making time. Let's start right off. Do you feel the might of hostilities or the might of US military power will get Iran to subside or to back off?
Yes, definitely. At some point, it will work because the Iranian nation and the Iranian regime are not suicidal. They want to survive. They want to thrive. They want to continue to control everything in Iran, and especially to continue to kill their own citizens who do not want them, as we saw last January. Therefore, at some point, they will come to the breaking point beyond which they cannot survive. We have not yet reached that point, and therefore, if the American army will increase its hits on the Iranian regime, not only the oil facilities, also the people of the regime, as we did in the 28th of February, when we targeted the leadership. This is what should be targeted, maybe in order to change the leadership to other people who might be more normal and less ideologic or less jihadist as they are, in order to change the regime in Iran. Because ultimately, if the regime will remain as it is, we didn't do much. Therefore, the main goal, the main objective of this war should be the regime change in Iran.
So you mentioned at some point it will work. At some point, you mentioned that twice at least. But at what point? Donald Trump said 4 to 5 weeks is what it'll take. We're nearly 5 months in. And it still continues. It's exactly where it was. Iran is still continuing to fire on all these targets across the Gulf. And regime change is far away from the question. This regime that has now come in place is more hardlined than the earlier one.
Look, apparently the hits which they got, they can still absorb those hits and still continue to kill their own people in the streets. That's why the people do not demonstrate these days. They can still launch missiles, drones, and other things to Kuwait, to Qatar, to Bahrain, to the Emirates, to Saudi Arabia, to Jordan, as they did also. Yes, they still have the capabilities, and therefore they deserve much more powerful power maintained on them in order to convince them that the next station will be the hell. While if they understand that the next station for them is the hell, they will raise up a white flag because they don't want to lose control over the country.
So nuclear program is what initially, it was the original sticking point. And here we are trying to deal with the Strait of Hormuz, which has become a bigger sticking point. So if you look at it from a scheme of things, it seems that hostilities and inconsistencies or divergences have only increased. At this point, 30 million people had signed up for the martyrdom program at Iran, had called it. This was at the time when US president had threatened that he will go after the power infrastructure. This was just a day before US eventually announced that ceasefire on the 7th or the 8th of April. When you say that the Iranian regime, it's not suicidal, why were there human chains being formed around the power structures and these millions who are signing up to give up their lives for the country? And then obviously those visuals from the funeral procession of the late Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, when you saw large protests taking place and that funeral procession, not only in Iran, but also in Iraq. It's not just now Iran, but it's the Shia community which seems to stand together, and it's against America and Israel. When you put all of this in one context, how do you see this one for America?
No. Don't get mistaken. There are big differences inside the Iranian regime. The IRGC on one side and the parliament is on another side. They are very much fragmented, yet the one who still keeps maintaining power on everybody else is the IRGC, and especially a guy named Wahidi. He is the head of the IRGC. He is forcing everybody to straighten the line with him and with his radical standpoints. But another thing which we tend to forget, don't forget that this regime actually is in a jihad against the infidels, against the Satan. They represent Allah in their view, and they are fighting the American Satan and the Israeli Satan and all the infidels in between, including India. And this is their mindset. This is what motivates them, because they are fighting the fight of Allah. And Allah doesn't give up. Allah doesn't surrender. Allah doesn't raise the white flag. And this is the mindset of these people. And therefore, we should all be very concerned with nuclear weapons, which they want to acquire, because the nuclear weapon in the hands of Allah is very, very dangerous, unlike nuclear weapons in the hands of India.
I'll request if you can keep the religious rhetoric apart, but if you can just look at the battlefield at this point and understand what really will work and get a peace. Memorandum of understanding has been signed, ceasefire announced multiple number of times, extended multiple number of times, and here we are with hostilities right back where we saw them in early March, immediately after the war started. But when you look at what can eventually draw peace, will the US just have to back off, or do you consider US to continue with the military strikes? And at some point, as you had mentioned, that will end. So that means it's a protracted war. Am I correct?
First of all, it is a religious war. Start with this. In the mindset of the Iranians, we might not understand it because we are not thinking in this kind of terms of religion. But from their point of view, they are in a jihad. This is the first thing. Second thing, apparently President Trump understands the mistake which he made by signing this MOU like a month ago. This MOU actually is a surrender of America. Later, he understood, and many people contributed to this understanding, that this is actually a surrender to the Iranians, and he actually now wants to change it. After all, don't forget, it is not an agreement. It's not an agreement yet. It's only a memorandum of understanding. However, in their understanding, the Iranians, that they control the Hormuz. Since when? The Hormuz is in international waters. Imagine, let's say, Morocco and Gibraltar will start imposing taxes on ships in the Gibraltar Straits. Turkey will start taking money from ships which cross the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles. China will start taking money from Malacca Straits. The whole world will be different. The international law will be totally altered by the Iranians if the United States surrender to this Hormuz issue, which the Iranians want. And therefore, if we want to keep the world normal, without the intervention of Allah in everything, we have to make sure that the Iranian regime is toppled, that they go back to the Hausa, to their learning house in Qom, and stay there with the books, not with the government, not with the state, not with the army, not with terrorism, and especially not with nuclear weapons.
Allow me to come in there, sir. It's the Strait of Hormuz. We were discussing that. You mentioned it as well. This was never a problem before Feb 28th. There is a very, very clear understanding and analysis which suggests, when you look at the last number of months, that Iran has emerged more emboldened and they are asserting more control over this strait. And this was never the case before that. They had threatened that they will blockade it. US never saw it coming. Israel, admittedly, the Israeli Prime Minister said that they never estimated that Iran would do this. They've done it. Now they've understood that this is their biggest leverage and they will not let it go. Even go as far as to say, and this is the Supreme Leader's own advisor saying, that this is more important than atomic bombs. Atomic bombs was the crucial original sticking point, and now it's the Strait of Hormuz. It's their biggest leverage point. At any point, do you feel Iran is going to let go of this strait, given the geographic advantage that they have and US doesn't?
If they have the choice between staying in power or blocking the Hormuz Straits, they will give up. Because, as I said in the beginning, they are not suicidal as a regime. They want to survive. Of course, they want to impose their terms on others as much as they can. Once they understand that they cannot anymore blackmail the world by closing the Hormuz Straits, they will give up.
Lieutenant Colonel, you presented your perspective. I've provided certain amount of counter perspectives to that. It's in hope that our audiences can draw their own conclusions from this. Pleasure speaking with you. There will be more to discuss. Look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you.